Thank you. As always, a British accent just makes it sound a lot more official. It's a great pleasure to be here today to present to this audience. I appreciate your attendance. For those of you that don't know, we're very fortunate to have a partnership with VMware that has brought us into their end user computing organization to add a new layer of security across their product line. Today, we're fortunate to have Ashish Jain, who is leading that effort to provide two-factor authentication across the VMware stack. I'm not going to take any of his thunder away. His presentation goes into great detail as to what that means. If you don't know Ashish, he's a fantastic and well-respected executive that's worked for organizations like Business Objects, PayPal, and Ping, developing identity and access systems that many of us have used but may not have known it, as well as the fact that he's leading the charge, as I mentioned earlier, with regard to the end-user computing effort at VMware. With that, I'd like to introduce Ashish to take us through how two-factor authentication is making its way into VMware.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks for coming, guys. So my name is Ashish. I lead the product management for identity and workspace product offerings for VMware. I've been with VMware for about 5 years, and I have been in the industry around identity for about 15 years or so. And I believe that we are at a point in our industry where the combination of identity and mobility will drive access to the corporate resources for all the enterprise users. So I'll try to walk you through the goals of our product, where we go in next, and then I'll have a set of use cases that we were trying to address around 2FA, and I want to walk you through our thinking into picking up Authy as a partner, and then at the end, I would like to give you a demo of how those two things kind of work together. And I understand that this is the after lunch session, so I'll try to make it interesting and keep you awake. Many of you may know of VMware in the data center context and how do we get into the hypervisor space. But the end user computing BU of VMware, which is where I work at, we have about kind of 1.2 billion run rate. We have about 65,000 customers, and we are fairly well present in the retail, healthcare, education, and the finance space. One of the common things that we look at when we sell primarily to IT, we look at 3 major trends as we see across the industry. We see a lot of types of mobile devices coming into the place. It's not a Windows world anymore. Things may change again with Windows 10, but as of now, we still see a lot of iOS and Android, and not to mention when you go across the globe, the types of Android devices are a lot different than what you see in US. At the same time, we see a lot of different types of applications, whether they are cloud applications or they are mobile applications entering in the workplace. And the last part is that most of the employees now they have access to Snapchat and Facebook and Dropbox. So the expectations around services that an IT delivers to them, they're a lot different than what they used to be 10 years ago. So whenever we build a product, even though we sell to IT, we need to make sure that we get the right adoption for the end users, and the experience requirement around our offering has increased a lot more in the last decade or so. This is a quick chart to just show you that in terms of the device diversification, the number of PCs entering the workplace, they kind of stay flat at about 300 million units or so. The number of mobile devices, they kind of increase to 1.5 billion in a couple of years. So think about that for a second, that every PC or laptop entering the workplace, you're going to have 5 mobile devices entering the workplace. So whenever you design a solution or a product or an offering that's targeting the enterprise, we need to make sure that we kind of look at that as a mobile first scenario, and whether it's security or it is experience, it has to take into account that for every PC, I'm going to have 5 devices that people will use to access my resources. The last time I checked, iPhone still hasn't built an Ethernet slot. So what that means is that, and it may change next week, even though I'll be surprised. In the past, you come into your work, you bring your laptop, you connect to a blue cable, and you have access to all the resources. That concept has now changed. You want to be able to access from a mobile device any resource in the cloud or behind your corporate firewall without having to plug in that cable. And that puts additional requirements for the enterprise services to make sure that experience and that communication is secure. This is essentially what kind of gives away from, in the past, we used to call network as the perimeter, into what we call identity is the new perimeter. You need a cloud control plane where you can control who should have access to what resource from what device, depending upon where you are coming from and what location are you coming from. So identity kind of becomes the new control plane in the world that we live in today. This is where we kind of come into introducing what we call Workspace ONE. We launched that earlier this year as a single place where you can go in to access all of your applications, whether those applications are web, internal or external, whether they are native or mobile applications developed by public vendors or by your own IT developers, or if they are virtual applications running in the data center and streamed through your iPad. So I'll give you a very quick walkthrough of how that looks like. So as an end user into an employee, I come in, I log in, I have access to a single place, and we offer that as a browser or as native applications on iOS, Android, and Windows 10. You come in, you log in once, and we'll talk about that more in a second, and then you have access to all the applications. In addition to that, an IT can customize it. They can have their own copyright, their footers, their logos, and background. So it kind of looks like a single intranet that you come in and you're able to get SSO access to essentially every resource that is available to you as an enterprise. If I switch gears to kind of mobility a little bit, the experience when you access a native application today happens something like this. You go in, you download the application. For instance, if I get OneDrive, the first thing that you have to do is enter a login information, right? So they have to do a discovery. Then you have to authenticate, and the authentication may be AD username and a password. It can be secure ID, Symantec VIP, or whatever have you. And then eventually you have access. The challenge with this model is that you have to go through this experience for each and every mobile app that you access on your device. There is not really a good way for any identity provider to manage state on a device today. All the native public apps today, most of them essentially have an embedded browser, which runs into a sandbox. So there is no way for any application to share that information with the other application. So if I log into Box or Dropbox or Workday or WebEx 10 seconds later, I have to do the exact same flow, enter my tenant or email address, enter my credentials before I can have access. Most of the applications also kind of have expiry in terms of 30 days or 1 week, so you have to do that every week. The other challenge is that when a person leaves the company, there is no way for an IT admin to wipe that application or the offline data from the device. So when we talk about Workspace ONE, the experience becomes something like this. You download an application, like I mentioned, you have it native for iOS, Android, and Windows 10. You enter your tenant URL, and you're able to have access to all the applications and resources. I will talk about how we do authentication today. Once you have access, you're able to have a single click, single sign-on to any web application that you want. You're also able to have access to any virtual application. Think about having a data center Excel spreadsheet running somewhere else that you can stream on your iPad. You also get to have access, again, single sign-on to any native application on the device. The way we do that is that, let me ask you this, how many of you have heard of MDM, EMM, or that terms? Okay, that's a pretty decent size of room then. VMware also acquired a company called AirWatch about 2 years ago. And what we do is we enroll the device, and as part of the enrollment, we also push a certificate on the device. We have now built adapters specific to iOS using their APIs and Android and Windows 10, so that we are able to leverage that to convert into the identity tokens that we can do SSO to all the other applications. So given all that, we are able to give an experience bringing identity and mobility together for all app types. So let me do a very quick demo of how that looks like. So as an end user, I come in, I I log into my workspace. I see a lot of applications, web applications. I can do a single sign-on. In this case, I go to DocuSign, which is a native application, one touch, never have to enter credentials. I have single sign-on. I'm going to do next into Salesforce. Again, download from iTunes, no SDK, no other code changes, works for any application because A, we rely on the OS level APIs, and second, we rely on the identity protocols. In this case, I'm showing a high graphics application running in a data center that I'm remoting to my iPad without being challenged again. The part which comes next is that now we have been able to get all application, all enterprise resources into a single flow. The challenge which comes with that is not all applications are same. Not all users are same, not all devices are same. So we want to be able to give an experience that contextual depending upon who the user is, what device he's coming from, what location he's coming from, and what application he's trying to access. For instance, the user can be an employee or a contractor. He can actually be a privileged admin account. He may be in R&D, marketing, sales, and so forth. And all of those are attributes that feed into a policy engine where we can decide what's the most secure and the most optimal experience for this user. The same thing goes for device. The device types may be different. The device may be managed or unmanaged. It can be a BYOD or corporate owned. And based on that, I may give you a different access. Applications, they can be virtual, they can be native, they can be highly sensitive, they can be less sensitive with no offline data. And location-wise, I can come in through a corporate Wi-Fi network. I can come through an open Wi-Fi network. So we look at all of data which we collect at runtime and contextually feed that into our rules engine and give them the experience that's most relevant and most secure. One of the challenges with this approach is that we want to be able to make sure we can give you access to your more sensitive applications without having to switch the context or without having to go around the system and find other ways to access it. This is where security kind of becomes a lot more critical. And I know security by itself is a fairly broad term, but if you think about it, every week you hear the X number of accounts gets hacked, or the passwords got leaked, or the information got compromised. And when we are trying to build a secure access platform for all the applications, we need to kind of make sure that we take that into account. If you look into the IT spend for the last few years, the IT spend has remained flat. Security spend continue to increase, and the only thing outpacing the security spend is the security losses. So that kind of tells the picture that if we don't handle it today, we're going to continue to have a problem in building a platform that is giving you secure access to all the applications. At a high level, when we looked at use cases, like I mentioned, we acquired AirWatch a few years ago. The way AirWatch or any EMM server operates is that it uses a set of APIs from iOS, Android, and Windows 10. And most common things, for instance, if the device is jailbroken, if the device has a PIN code or not, if the device is coming from a location that you know of, if the device has encryption or not, we can get to capture all of that through a server side, and we are able to push the right application server side to the to the end user springboard. So there's a lot of power which comes in by being able to manage the device. We wanted to make sure that the enrollment process into this system every time uses more than username and a password. And even though we have a few other partners which does strong auth for us, we wanted to make sure that that experience, A, is flawless, and B, it is given out of the box rather than trying to integrate with somewhere else. The second requirement we had was around contextual auth. If you're trying to access a finance application, highly sensitive, from a Starbucks Wi-Fi, open Wi-Fi network, we want to make sure that we provide some additional challenges so that the experience is not limited. You still have access, but I get the right controls and right confidence that you should be here. If we go a little bit more, the other detailed requirements we had were around experience. Like I mentioned before, our job is to sell to IT, but at the same time, the people who use it are employees. if we develop an experience which is secure but nobody uses it, we have two problems which can happen. One, people stop using it and complain, which everybody loses. Second, they find a way to get around the system, what we call the shadow IT. So we wanted to make sure that whatever we give, we are able to build an experience that's intuitive and delightful, and it's not kind of not kind of out of the way. I have to enter few additional tokens which I will never get to when I'm trying to do it. The second important thing was for reporting. So we sell into a lot of regulated industries, healthcare, finance, and so forth. We wanted to make sure that the solution we build around 2FA is able to have very comprehensive auditing and reporting capabilities, so that we can do compliance, we can do auditing, we can do troubleshooting. And as we sell into the other systems, we are able to integrate into them to provide a comprehensive view of the usage of the data and the devices and the applications. Going forward, we can also feed this information into predictive analysis, where we can determine whether or not this account is subject to be hacked in future. The other major requirement we had was around modularity. As we build this stack and we build our identity platform, we want to leverage that not into just our workspace, but across VMware into any product on-prem or in the cloud. And we wanted to make sure that this offering is embeddable into wherever we take our platform into. Either they are VMware products or any partners that we work. We did not want to essentially create or reinvent the wheel every time. If I double click on that requirements, the few other things that we had in mind was the self-service enrollment of the users. We always talk about the IT being consumerized. We wanted to make sure that we design a system and a solution that does not require a big IT rollout. We see a lot more times that the amount and the processes that are required to launch for a big organization takes essentially months and months. So we wanted to create a system where the user can self-enroll. The cost of maintenance, the cost of ongoing continued support is minimal, and there is no additional requirement that the end user or the IT needs to have to support this offering. The second part I talked about a little bit earlier is it has to be mobile first and mobile friendly. We call something in our company, we call mobile moments. If you are in a soccer field watching a game and you get an email by saying, give me access to that document, you don't want to say, let me get back to my desk and I'll give you tomorrow morning. The other example we give is that you're driving a car, you have to take a WebEx call, you don't have to stop it. Again, I'm not advising you take a WebEx call while driving a car, but the point is that we want to enable those mobile moments when the answer is not that let me get back to my desk, let me do that tomorrow morning. So whatever we do in terms of the solution for authentication, we have to make sure that does not require let me get back to you in 4 hours. The other part comes in kind of no separate token and device. Most of us, if not all of us, today walk with a smartphone in our pockets, which is always there, always on, and always connected. It probably has more computing power than the spaceship we first launched. We wanted to make sure that we can leverage it as compared to trying and ask the users to essentially go and get one more token. When we talk to doctors, one common use case is that you walk into a patient's place, you have an iPad, and you have a requirement to do a 2FA, and then your secure ID token or any other token is back at your desk. We wanted to make sure that, again, we can enable that use case without the doctor having to call the nurse or the doctor saying, let me go and get my papers first. The other part, VMware always have embraced heterogeneity. We wanted to make sure that whether it's Chrome or Android or Windows 10 or any other device that we see, we are able to support it. In some places, you actually do not have the push notification, so we wanted to make sure that for feature phones, we are able to support 2FA without, again, making additional requirement to support these use cases. And if there are any product managers in the room, you will realize that irrespective of the product, these two things always matter, which is time to market and the cost. You can develop a perfect solution. It takes 2 years, and probably nobody would care. We work in an industry which is changing at a very fast pace, So we wanted to make sure that whatever we build, we are able to bring to market in a very quick fashion as compared to 3 years of research, 6 months of building, 3 months of testing. The other thing is the cost per user. If you ask anyone how much should you charge for your offering, the answer is how much a customer is willing to pay. There's always a perceived value in your offerings and your product. And when you talk about identity and single sign-on and 2FA, the ceiling effect is normally that it's about 5 to 10% of what I access, what I pay for the service. So if I'm charging $20 per user per month for a service, I cannot ask for $10 per user per month just to do single sign-on or 2FA. So that kind of limits us our picture of how far can we go. So all those thoughts were essentially kind of playing in when we were looking for a solution, whether we build it, we buy it, we partner, and where do we go from here. Eventually, we kind of ran across Authy. So we looked at a couple of options. We did some POCs, and we ran into Authy. One thing we liked about Authy was that they were able to support the push notification, which kind of gives the mobile experience. They were able to support the SMS if the phone does not support it. And then they also had the one code for devices that do not have the capabilities to receive an SMS code. The second part we liked about Authy was that we were able to get support for a variety of devices, whether they even had a BlackBerry support, which we did not end up using. But the point is that we were able to get a fairly comprehensive device support, so we don't have to make the requirements to the end user. The last part, that how do we actually integrate with it? So the story behind this is, the way we did is that in our company, every quarter we do a hackathon. And it's normally a 2-day event. We spend a day and a half in building it, and the second half of the second day is when we essentially kind of report and present and all that. So we gave a challenge to our development team, and Thomas, who's in the audience. In a day and a half, we are able to get Authy, get an environment, able to integrate that with Workspace ONE, and able to show an end-to-end demo. Now, it wasn't really ready for shipping, but we were able to prove that with very simple 3 API calls across all different types of integration methods, and the users to be able to self-enroll, try, test it, give a feeling that yes, the experience is something that we can launch to our end users. We got that kind of confidence by a day and a half of hackathon. The other part which comes in, that when we give this solution to our customers, we don't want to have a context switching. They don't want to feel like I'm trying to access something and I completely switch to a very different context that I don't know why I'm doing it. And hence we were able to kind of completely brand it, white label it, and launch this as a VMware Verify offering. So customer still stays into the VMware concept. He still comes to Workspace to access all the applications, and for certain application, in certain situations, we're going to ask them to do additional authentication. So let me kind of walk you through how that experience looks like. So if I'm an end user, I come into a single place, I try to access the application. In this case, let's just say I access, actually this should work. I access WebEx. I'm already authenticated. I'm coming from a secure device. I have access, no additional requirement. In this case now, if I want to access ADP, which my IT believes is slightly more secure, when I click on it, what happens is that I'm going to send a push notification to a device that is enrolled. It's a BYOD device. User comes in, enroll it, and I'm going to send a notification. The user would click on it. He will accept it. Behind the scene, we send a message back to our server, and the user has now access. The user can enroll more than one device. There's also Chrome plugins where you can access it, but the idea is that now I can give them still a single place, same consistent experience for all of your application, and for certain cases, I can ask them for extra verification. The other example I want to show you is going to talk about what we call the location-based access. So let me kind of play that video real quick. So the way it works is that, in this case, I'm on my iPad. I'm connected to my VMware corporate Wi-Fi. I access, in this case, Workday. Things work as it is. Behind the scene, we log you in. We create a SAML token. We send that to Workday. You have single sign-on access. I'm going to do next is that I'm going to change my Wi-Fi settings, and I'm going to now connect to Open Wi-Fi network. So I come into my settings, I find Open Wi-Fi, I connect to it. It takes a little bit to connect. I come into my same VMware Workspace, exact same application, but my device posture has now changed because I'm coming from a different place. What it does is it sends a notification, I come in, I approve it, and now I have access. So this goes back to based on the user, the device posture, the location, and the type of application you're trying to access, I can push extra notification, extra verification to make sure that the experience is secure and the experience is what you were looking for. So if I have to kind of summarize it, kind of key takeaways from where we went through the process, what we kind of learned through it is that first, and I say that every time I talk about is that leverage the standards the industry has developed. And I primarily talk about the identity standard. So if you're writing a new application, most of you would have a need to authenticate the user, to manage the users. In the past, there used to be proprietary tokens, proprietary formats. The industry kind of came away with SAML. And the last 2 to 3 years, we finally have a stack which work across browser, across mobile applications, across APIs into the OAuth and OpenID Connect stack. So I can understand the urge to develop faster and try to ignore and build all of that into your own product. But longer term, you are so much more better if you use the applications that are given to you or the toolkits that are given to you by bunch of years of work trying to build that. So if you are trying to build a new application, keep that in mind. When you take it to the enterprise, this is going to become a must-have, so it's kind of better off to start there. The second point I want to highlight is that security should not be an afterthought. There is a bunch of things that you can do later, and to be honest, I am a strong believer of time to market. Security is not one of those things. So rather than kind of trying to wait till the product is over, till I have a few customers, then I will build in security, try to have that DNA and that mindset from day one. And you don't want to be one of those stories which show up on Wall Street first page, except the reason is that you got hacked. So keep that in mind even before you start, that whatever you build, make sure the security is not an afterthought. The third point I want to articulate is when you're starting a new application or a new product, make sure you focus on your core value. It may make sense that I can do so much more. It's not really that hard. If you are successful and if you have adoption, you will have time to come back and do those things. However, if you essentially start to building a complete stack without focusing on where do you differentiate, how do you differ from your competition, and try to focus on time to market, you're going to end up building something which is great, but people by that time would have moved on, or the offering is too generic. So in generally, I normally tell people that when you are trying to build a product, and if the product you launch is 1.0 and it has no complaints and no bugs, you probably waited too long. So I understand this is probably not what you hear from Apple, but in generally, you want to make sure that you launch a product as early as possible. Differentiating from your competition is where you focus, and then if you are successful, you will actually get to build other things that you want to build, but make sure that focus on your core value and time to market is very, very critical. I think on that note, so I want to talk about, again, we started with how the combination of mobility, the combination of identity, and the modern stack that the industry has now built across web and native application, and you couple that with the key security requirements. 2FA is just one of them, but to kind of give you an example, we believe that we can now finally able to deliver an experience that is secure from an IT point of view and relevant and contextual and delightful for an end user perspective. And in the IT employee space, this is something that we have not been able to do before. So I'm kind of very happy that where we ended up. And if you haven't had a chance, I can give you a personal demo after the call or we can set you some test accounts and tenants so that you can get the experience by yourself. I'll stay here for some more questions, and Mark, if you want to join me, thank you for your time.